Welcome into episode number 3 of the Scholastic Sit Down. Happy to have you all as always. Dylan Ward is to the left of me, I assume on my screen. My name is Luke Jordan, and we actually have had an escalate in the amount of SHL games played. We'll have plenty to break down, plenty to look forward to alongside checking on the outside of the SHL, all that good stuff. On top of all of that, New Trier's head coach, the three-peat man, Adam Cheris, will be joining us on episode number 3 today. How fitting, Dylan.
How fitting indeed, and boy, New Trier really got to business this week, especially in one of their games, which we highlighted as one to anticipate last week. But boy, it's going to be interesting breaking down that one, Luke. I won't give any spoilers, but yeah, if you know the game we're talking about, it was one of the wildest final scores I've ever seen in the Scholastic Hockey League.
Yeah, football came early on the weekend, that's for sure. As there are only 5 games to look at this week. More next week, of course. Let's just get right into it without any. So, starting off, first game of 5, it was St. Ignatius on the road against the Patriots of Stevenson, and the shots on goal lopsided, but the score not so much. Shots 41 to 17 favoring the Wolfpack, but Asher Ali, who I've seen stand on his head already once this season in that game against Fighter, he plays even better in this one, stopping 38 out of 41, but in the end, it would not be enough. James Erdis and his 2 goals, a clutch one late on in the third period, would help the Wolfpack prevail in this one 4-3 to open up the week, Dylan.
Yeah, it was a 3-0 lead for St. Ignatius early in the second period, but Stevenson, proved that they can at least somewhat stage a comeback. They score 2 goals in a minute 10 seconds late in that second period, including a power play goal to cut the deficit to just one. The game winner comes in the third period by James Ernest, made it 4-2 at the time, and then Stevenson adds another late one. But Luke, you highlighted the total shots. Look at these shots by period. In the first, St. Ignatius 13-3, then in the second 14-7, and then 14-7 again. So even breaking it down period by period, that's just consistent dominance throughout that 51 minutes.
The word I was exactly thinking of, Dylan. You consistently beating them by 7+ shots every period. You're obviously at a good chance of coming away with the win there. Stevenson would turn into the next day, Wednesday night, a 7:20 p.m. game against the Spartans of Glenbrook North. And this was the 6th SHL game of the regular season. Mind you, this was Stevenson's 4th already, getting a jump
Right.
on the schedule on a back-to-back as this one for Stevenson, they were able to pile on more shots. They put on 27 to the Spartans 31. But in the end, Glenbrook North got out in front early with Raymond Karras opening the scoring with his first of the year. Jason Pashenko tied up things to end the first period. From then on, a 4-0 run from 2 goals in the second, 2 in the third from GBN was never enough for Stevenson to catch up to a final score of 5-2 as the Spartans started off with a win.
Yeah, and you want to break down the shots by period again. GBN outshot Stevenson 18-4 in the first period. And
Wow.
as you said, Luke, that was 1-1 in terms of goals. So Stevenson probably felt pretty good. And then throughout the remainder of the game, they actually outshot GBN by 10 while GBN went on that run. So it just goes to show you, I mean, shots on goal is probably the most reliable way in hockey to track the flow of the game, but it's so unreliable at the same time, especially in the SHL where we see these crazy situations.
Yeah, and to jump into the weekend, I think this is an exact explanation of what you're talking about, but almost on a different avenue. Torres, let's just say there were, let's do the math here, 32 total shots on goal in the next game that we're talking about, and there were 15 goals. 15 goals.
Tough
Can we
night
can
to
we
do.
can we do the math there? That is a save percentage of 531 between the 2 goalies. I I
Yeah.
don't know if there had to have been more shots in this game. That I
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Adam about it because I think he'll back us up here. There's no way there's only 32 total shots in this game. And without me revealing the score, let me just reveal to you the 3 stars of the game, and then you'll kind of get an idea of how high scoring this one was. George Knight, who came up from New Trier Blue this year with a hat trick and an assist as the first star, Keegan Rowing, a returner, one of the few on this green team with 2 goals and an assist, and then Jack Wolleben with 1 goal and 2 assists. It was a 7-1 first period for New Trier. They never looked back, winning this one by a total of 10 to 5. 10 to 5, and that includes 4 power play goals.
Yeah, 10-5 is absolutely diabolical. And Luke, you take a look at this new Trier Green box score. You've got 8 guys on here who had a multi-point game and 14 skaters with at least a point in the game. And I mean, you know, for GBN, a nice 5-2 win coming into this one. Now you score 5 goals and get running clocked. I mean, that does not happen very often in the Scholastic Hockey League. And we'll talk about just how rare it is when we get to trivia. But I mean, double digits on the scoreboard, 15 goals in all. I mean, Luke, this is one of the highest scoring SHL games of all time. I remember a couple of years ago, the St. Viator Lions beat Stevenson 8-7 in OT, and that had the same number of goals as this one, even though it was not as close. But I mean, man, oh man, something was in the air on that night at Winnetka.
Yeah, and just to get a retrospect on how they scored 4 power play goals, Glenbrook North commits 30 penalty minutes in that game. And we talked about last week how New Trier had 28 penalty minutes in their first game. They were able to bounce back in this one, got the discipline back together, probably in cue to Coach Cheris. Only 4 penalty minutes, 2 penalties, one to Wilson and one to Rowing for the Trevians as they just continue to win so far this year. After this game, 2-0 to start. Not bad for the defending three-peat state champions as we turn into Sunday.
Well, Luke, I'll just throw out there real quick. New Trier, they were up 7-1 after the first period in this game. So if they were on pace for a lot more than just 10, so that I mean, you could say they slowed down a little bit, but that start just really propelled them, and they just didn't look back, quite frankly.
Up next on Sunday, the icebreaker for both Loyola Academy and Carmel playing their first SHL games of the season, and only one team got to achieve their first SHL scores, plus many more, as Loyola, once again, quick start, 3-0 first period. Then they had a 1-0 second. They led 4-0 after two. And then just to pat on, they found an extra five in the third, and they run away with this one. Charlie Trap with a 17 save shutout, and the Ramblers pile on 44 as they win 9-0, Dylan.
Yeah, 9-0. I mean, listen, that's just dominance right there. 14-17, the shots on goal. And for Loyola, they've been waiting a while to get started in SHL play. They had a couple exhibition games. I know Carmel did too, but boy, to kick things off at home ice and take care of business against this Carmel team, you know, every game in the SHL is a tough game. So when you're able to win 9-0 against whoever you're playing, it's got to give you some confidence to start the season off. And let me just throw out there, if you remember from episode 0, Loyola, it was my state championship prediction, and I'm liking the 9-0 start from them.
Yeah, and how about Maxim Kading, a returner for these Ramblers? 2 goals and 2 assists led the way and conducted the train for the Ramblers. As later on, it was St. Ignatius headed up north to Lake Forest to take on the Scouts. An intense, low-scoring one at the Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. Shots on goal totals: Wolfpack with 26, Lake Forest with 23. Neck and neck, these two teams went after nothing was scored in the first. It was Christopher Kelly scoring in the second, and then each team with a power play goal in the third. But do the math. St. Ignatius was able to hold on with a 2-1 tight victory here.
Yeah, those power play goals in the third period separated by just about 2 minutes 30 seconds as well. But sometimes when you trade goals back and forth, especially on power play opportunities, it comes down to what you can do at 5-on-5 play. And a lot of times in hockey, one goal will be enough to win a game. And, again, even though it was 2-1, you can kind of say that about the even strength goal by Kelly in the second period. And Luke, I just want to throw out there that in spite of the 0-0 first period, St. Ignatius actually outshoots Lake Forest 14-2 in the first period. Then Lake Forest makes it a little bit closer, but that seems to be a running theme so far in the games we've been reviewing this week.
Yeah, and these power plays have been dominant. you look at the individual skater stats. We don't have team totals yet. Sam's got to get on that. So, Sam Schwartz, if you're listening, you're on the verge of being fired. If I had any power, as three players have already had two power play goals on the season, and New Trier has played two games, and they have two players with two. George Knight with two power play goals, Keegan Rowing with two power play goals, and then Loyola, who only played one game, has Nick Thomas, the defenseman, with two power play goals. So it just goes to show you that power plays are on the tear so far early on in this season, Dylan.
Yeah, and one more thing while we're reviewing this week's final scores is I just want to say this game was my pick for the highest scoring game of the week, and obviously it becomes the lowest scoring game of the week. And then Luke, remind me, I think you picked Stevenson and Lake Forest, or was that Stevenson and St. Ignatius, maybe?
Stevenson and St. Ignatius, but yeah.
Yeah, and that one finishes 4-3. So you're on the right track, but I mean, Luke, neither of us picked New Trier GBN. That's the clear winner this week. So we're gonna stay 0-0 in terms of points, and we'll see what we can do for next week.
Well, we saw in the Trevians TAC 10 against Glenbrook North, as Dylan said. Now we get to talk to the mastermind behind it all, having won three state championships in a row, Adam Cheris. Up next. Five, four, three, two, one. Big thanks to Adam Cheris for joining us here on episode number 3 of the Scholastic Sit Down. We got to talk to him last year, got to talk to him this year, Dylan. Probably get to talk to him next year if we're still running this thing. It's always a pleasure to have him consistently on and just get to talk to one of the main faces of the SHL.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And with all the playoff runs they've made in the SHL and state, we've definitely gotten to know him quite a bit, whether it's here on the podcast or actually broadcasting the games. But yeah, thanks to Adam for coming on.
He's got to wear that sweet green blazer he wore at the United Center sometime this year,
Mm.
maybe for a rivalry game or something. It's cool looking. Anyways, we'll look to the outside of the SHL, covering four leagues today: the IHSHL North Central, Illinois West, Chicago Catholic, and the Metro Girls High School League that has begun tiering play. And something new that I'm going to do every week, and we'll review it after every week, is I will pick a game of the week that is hopefully close, and we'll get to look over it in the next coming week. So we'll do that
I love it,
last.
Luke.
First, a summary. Thank you, Dylan. A summary. Deerfield is at the top of the North Central 3-0-0. Nobody else up to three wins yet. Notre Dame has two alongside a tie. Chicago North 2-1. And down at the bottom, Rockford 0-2, Prep 0-1. In between, just a ton of teams either 500 or have not played hockey yet, at least in league play. Looking over into the West, DuPage still leads the pack a couple of games over this past week for the West Division. DuPage at the top, Glenbard second, Plainfield third. The only teams who have not played left in the West Division, Lyons Township and Equa Valley. Over to the Chicago Catholic Hockey League. Um, Crickets. Nothing going on right now. St. Ignatius is still at the top 3-0-0. There were no games over this past week, meaning the defending state runner-up Bennett Red Wings, the Providence Catholics, and St. Rita Mustangs have still not begun CCHL play yet. Lastly, and newly going over to the Metro Girls High School Hockey League, where tiering has begun, most teams having already played two games. Only teams that have not played games, Lake Forest Academy and Maine, at the top of that 14-team leaderboard so far. It is Fenwick, York, which is a new addition to the Metro Girls High School Hockey League, Glenbrook, Burlington Central, and New Trier, the defending state champs, round out the top five. Barrington, who's been dominant for the last 2 years, actually started their season on the losing side, having lost to Chicago Central 4-3.
Well, Luke, let me stop you right there real quick. And for those of you at home who don't know about how the Metro Girls works, and I think does Illinois West still do the tiering? I don't.
They do
Not right.
not. They
Yeah.
used
So,
to.
Luke, I mean, to be completely honest, it still sometimes baffles me, but do you want to explain to the people how the tiering and seating portions of the schedule work? Because I remember Barrington, they were in the bottom bracket last year, but then ended up going to the United Center and finishing second place in the state. But these first 5 games or so to begin your year are very important as to who you play and what bracket you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And now with 14 teams in the MGHL this year, you're going to have Still most likely two divisions, the higher up, which is called the Scholastic, the lower down, which is called the Founders. That's where Barrington ended up last year after missing numbers in a lot of their tiering games. And then they proceeded to go on to the state championship as it was. But yes, it is a higher division and a lower division. So they're going to take a knife, cut this right in between seven teams. So as of right now, if this were the case and all games were finished, standings result as is, it'd be Fenwick, York, Glenbrook, Burlington Central, New Trier, Chicago Central, and Naper Valley able to move on to the Scholastic where they play their regular season, which is the higher division, and the lower seven would play in the Founders. So it's really just a tiering round to kind of bring in the competition and make sure that you're facing teams that are more at your level, usually the case over the course of the regular season. So
Yeah, and with the boys, there's just so many teams that you're able to just do that with different leagues like the SHL, CCHL, Illinois West. But for the girls, it's just one league. So if they all played each other, you could have some lopsided scores there.
So that now brings us to our first ever outside the SHL game of the week, and it is coming on a Saturday. It is the Saturday night nightcap, 7:30 p.m. in the IHSHL North Central. My game of the week is going to be a state championship rematch from 2 years ago as Chicago North takes on Prep. Obviously, not a lot to look at between the records up to this point. Chicago North is 2-1. Prep has started their season 0-1 after a loss to the 2-0-1 Notre Dame Dons, that a score of 2-1. Chicago North is 2-1, beating Rockford, Highland Park, but losing to the top seeded Deerfield team. Honestly, considering it's so early in the season, pick this one as a big point of nostalgia. Just these two teams meeting back once again after having met in league play the last few years, as well as meeting at the United Center. And I'm sure some of the young guns who are making their way up to varsity still are very aware that this is a well and alive rivalry. So that game will be at Mount Prospect Ice Arena, also known as the Nicholas Sportsplex, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. And now, as we've looked through that, let's look at SHL play this week. Five, four, three, two, one. Well, this week there are two hockey games in the SHL. Um, yeah, I don't know if it's a lonely action because teams are taking off the weekend for the Ryder Cup or the great college football weekend coming up. Maybe some preseason NHL they got to go watch.
Well,
But
they're
yeah,
probably
we.
taking it off for my birthday, Luke, of course, which is this
Oh,
weekend. So
this
yeah,
week is it
I can't be
Saturday?
playing. Well, they know that I can't get out there and broadcast a game on my birthday. I need the day
Oh,
off,
you're
so
right.
that's why the scheduling is like that.
Has GBS been waiting to play until after your birthday?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Starting on Wednesday, it is St. Viator on the road against the Carmel Catholic Corsairs. They play out of the Glacier Ice Arena in Vernon Hills. They'll be playing on the South Rink that night, 7:40 p.m. Carmel, a rough start to their season, but then again, we don't know how good Loyola is. And after that 9-0 loss that Carmel suffered to them, you'd have to imagine they're pretty good. They opened up with another tough opponent in St. Viator. But hey, remember, they did lose their last appearance against Lake Forest. So you never know what can happen, especially when your goalie stands on their head, Dylan.
Yeah, no doubt. And for Carmel, they go on the road, a tough atmosphere to play in at American Heartland Ice Arena against Loyola, and this will be their home opener in Vernon Hills at Glacier. And they're playing a St. Viator team who has got a +4 goal differential at 8-4, but a 1-1 record, as you said, as they just recently lost to the Lake Forest Scouts by 1 goal. So, I mean, listen, this is the SHL, anything can happen, but Carmel's gonna come out with some energy and a little bit of momentum after losing 9-0, and they're going to want some revenge. Even though that revenge won't come against Loyola, it's their next game, so they're definitely going to want to right that ship.
Yeah, and talk about how PJ Eberhardt, head coach of Carmel Catholic, like I said, needs a goalie to stand on their head in a game like this. Well, he's got returner Mason Stanley, who I'm sure will get the start in that one. Once again, 7:40, September 24th. That is a Wednesday. Let's jump a couple of days, and then there's one game. It's a late nighter on Saturday before we open up next week's play, where Lake Forest plays the first game of next week. They play the last game of this week. It is a road game against Stevenson. Definitely going to be an unpredictable and interesting one. Stevenson seeking their first win of the SHL season, having already played 4 games. They're 0-4 up to this point. Meanwhile, Lake Forest has been in two tight games. They upset one of the state favorites in St. Viator back 8 days ago as we're recording, and then St. Ignatius, who they faced yesterday on Sunday, they lost to 2-1. Should be a pretty good one, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and Stevenson, it's the same as Carmel. They're going to want to take an opportunity here to grab that win at home ice. They're at a minus 11 goal differential, 0-4, the most games played in the SHL, but the least amount of points. They're definitely gonna want to right that ship, as I mentioned. And Lake Forest, I mean, they've had an impressive start to the SHL season. They drop one to St. Ignatius by a goal, but they do beat St. Viator, as we mentioned earlier. So this should be a very interesting game and give you a good idea of where these two teams are at because the Lake Forest Scouts, as of right now, early signs say that they're going to jump a couple spots in the SHL standings by the way they've been playing, especially at the preseason invite tournament as well. And for Stevenson, boy, I mean, from their perspective, you just need a win here, man. And if you don't, you might be in trouble. I know it's early on in the season, but hey, 5 games played already out of 27 total in the regular season. It's going to add up quickly if you're not careful.
Absolutely right. 8 of the 10 teams in the SHL will make the playoffs, and Stevenson trying not to be one of the two eliminated. Of course, with plenty of time to go, but you don't want to
Yep.
start at the bottom of the barrel. So, Dylan, we're doing our highest scoring game of the week, and we have two games to choose from. Your rule, the guest on the podcast, the breakdown guy, as in you this week, and then it will be me next week. You get the first choice. You have a coin flip to choose from, heads or tails, between St. Viator and Carmel or Lake Forest and Stevenson.
Yeah, and Luke, no matter what, there's 2 games, right? So you get the other one. So no matter what, there will be points on the board after
Yes,
this week, which I'm very excited for.
might
Just
be
to
the only
remind
points we see all year. So,
yeah, just to remind everyone, you get 1 point if you are correct, if you get the highest scoring game, and you get half a point if you predict what is a tie for the highest scoring game. So there could be a situation where we each get half a point. There could be a situation where one of us gets half a point, but we're gonna track it right down here. So 0-0, as you can see. And I'm going to go ahead and say Lake Forest at Stevenson will be the highest scoring game of the season so far. I think, both of these teams have a reason to just keep piling shots on, and I think we're gonna see a lot of goals in that one. That's just my opinion.
I'm not saying it for the clicks, Dylan, but I think these two teams they could very much tie within scores. These are two games that could be very explosive. If they are, we'll see. We'll see how things go. But once again, he picked Lake Forest and Stevenson. That leaves me with St. Viator and Carmel. We'll see if somebody's going to get a point. We'll see if it's a whole point if one of us truly pick outright the best game.
Right.
But we will now enter our question of the week and trivia question for the remainder of this podcast.
That's to our end goal, which is to win state each year.
Yeah, and you talk about how it's a pipeline. You guys graduated 17 guys last year, and two of those, your goalies, Mark Pauly, and it just and why am I blinking? Is
Wyatt Schmidt.
Why Schmidt? Why
Yeah.
what blank did I just draw in my brain? Excuse me. But anyway, got two new goalies coming in. They've done a pretty good job to start. What can you say about your goaltending and defense tandem so far throughout the early goings of the season?
Yeah, well, like you said, we did graduate 17 players, so this is a little different for us. In prior years, we've always had, call it 8 to 12 returners. So having 5 guys coming back was certainly a different feel, but that's just the way it worked out last year. We had a really strong senior group, very heavy there, guys that were ready to play green, guys that certainly made us win state last year. So when we went through graduation, you kind of start looking at it, and it's what I told the kids, players all summer, all spring, was there's a lot of spots to fill, and it's going to be competitive. And I think it really brought out the best in our kids in the program because they all worked their tails off trying to give themselves the best shots. Tryouts were as competitive as I've ever seen. Really, some of the scrimmaging we did was, borderline. I was worried guys were going to get hurt. They were going that hard. And these are guys who are, hugging each other afterwards and shaking hands and going out for, Chick-fil-A or something right after. But they let it all hang out on the ice. So, getting your point, yeah, graduating 2 goalies, Um, we had 2 3-year goalies and Drew Dirdoff and Wyatt
Yeah.
Schmidt. So, kind of felt like that was just one of those special moments where you got a reliable guy in net who can win you any game at any given time. And as graduations came up, we look at the pipeline and we felt we had some good goalies in the program. We still think that they're very strong. But we were fortunate to get a goalie coming over from the Reapers, which was Max Reed, who's a junior this year. And we think very highly of his game. He certainly gives us that added element that, hey, if we don't have our best effort, he's going to have our backs. We're not going to, we don't have to worry about making a mistake here and there. He's going to pick us up. The D core you mentioned as well. We have 3 returners: Nolan Nagets, Kai Yang, Chase Marino. I've said it from day one. All 3 are all-state caliber, tremendous players, and they've been doing a great job so far, solidifying that base. They were added by 4 other guys who I think are also exceptional, really giving us what I think is just a tremendous back end. If we've talked about it before, and I've told you guys, like, our style of play this year is going to be a little bit different. I do think the other night was a little fluky for us to score 10 goals. More we look at the games like we played against GBS in the preseason, final, and how we played against Iggy by really just having that kind of smothering style, not giving up much of anything. Seeing opponents get 10, 15 shots against us, and from the peripheral shots that aren't really things that we're too concerned about. That's what we're holding on for. That's the kind of style we're playing now. And it's led by our D. Our D's just not giving up odd man rushes. They're pinching at the right times. They're very smart. They know where to be. They pick each other up. And it's with the support of our forwards, created a real tough challenge for our opposition.
Well, you hinted at the preseason invite. You guys took down GBS in the final, GBN in the semifinal, and you beat the York Dukes earlier in that tournament. Those were the 3 SHL teams you played. On top of that, I believe you had preseason games against Notre Dame, Hinsdale Central. What is the difference in approach when, you have that preseason game, whether it's just an exhibition game or it's in that tournament? And then when it actually starts counting for SHL points, do you use those games as kind of a tester to see, your lines or, however you want to go about answering that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's funny this year. I mean, we played Notre Dame in our first game, and again, Ryan Devlates, who's their coach, coached for us last year, and he went over there. We're good friends. We wanted to have a game. Everybody wants to see how they're going to look, heading into things. I want to play around with some lines before we head into the preseason, just to have an idea of what we want to do. And I don't know if you saw the highlights of that game. It was a crazy physical battle
Just the
where
score. I didn't see the actual box score or anything.
yeah, I mean, it was a 5-on-5, all chaos breaking loose kind of game where really got away from what we wanted to do in the game and didn't learn a whole lot from it. Other than that, you're going to play teams and everyone rises up for New Trier. And we knew Notre Dame would give us a good game regardless, but it was super physical. And how would we respond to the physical side of it? So I liked seeing that. But yeah, you look at each game differently, and yeah, there is certainly a different feel once you hit the ice and you're playing an SHL team. So to open the preseason with York for us, it was like, wow, okay, Thursday afternoon, York's first game. Like, I have so much respect for that program and what they've done over the years and how competitive they are and the talent that they brought in this year. They're a very strong team. So, you're looking at that saying, wow, this is a tough way to start the season. But I like how we hung on. It was a really tight game. It basically took them to score to get us to create any offense. Give us that, hey, better wake up or you're going to have a loss real quick. But great game. And then, yeah, to play GBN and play GBS, it's, you're getting a real feel for it. And for me, that's what I want to see, are those steps along the way to, as we built up, as we got to the semis and finals, were we doing the things that we talked about in between games? Were we making the adjustments that I thought we could make? And, the answer was yes. They really were listening. And, I thought our game against GBS was the best game we played. And, GBS is phenomenal. I mean, it's a great team, great coaches, great everything. And to be able to slow them down a little bit, was our goal. And we achieved that.
All right, well, Coach, this will be the last question on my
Sure.
behalf, and it's I think the one everyone's been waiting for. I really want to dive into this game that took place on Saturday night. Rematch of last year's SHL final. And yeah, you guys won state, but GBN takes the SHL trophy last year. Boy, did you guys get your revenge. It's not often that a team scores 5 goals and then gets running clocked in the same game. So just what exactly was in the air at Winnetka Ice Arena this night? And just, I mean, this is one of the highest scoring SHL games of all time. We did a little bit of research, but yeah, just kind of walk me through this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's, GBN's a great program. Obviously, they're going through change. I think the world of Jeff Marks, too. He's a really good coach. I know he's doing the right things there. When we played them in the preseason, we talked about revenge and, wanting to get back at them for winning, the SHL. We felt like timing's tight, guys tensed up, Raderman's outstanding goalie. There just things didn't go our way. But even after we won that, it wasn't we didn't get the satisfaction out of it. I think that the boys were still kind of chomping at their bits, and it happened to be we were playing at Winnetka ice rink, where that's the rink they beat us on. And you have guys who didn't forget about it, and guys who really wanted to exact some revenge. I think it was also we did a special weekend this weekend with New Trier and Winnetka Hockey Club, where it was combined effort, back-to-back games for all the teams in our program, all the teams in their program, all sorts of special events. So, the rink was packed. The boys were fired up. They came out, and what I challenged them before the game was not only the revenge factor, but also really trying to get off to a fast start. It's the one thing I hadn't seen from our team yet. And I said, you've shown me a lot of things I want to see, but I do want to see this fast start. We have the potential to do it. I haven't seen it yet. And their response was, going out and scoring the first three shifts and just absolutely flying the entire game. It got a little weird. After one period, it's 7-1, and games go like that. Just things go away. I've been on the other side of that. It's not fun. But at the same time, you get into the second period, we score a few more, and it's what do you do at that point? And our guys kind of crowd started to disperse, and I think my players kind of felt like the game might be over too, and we stopped playing. And hats off to GBN, they didn't stop playing. Their fans were going nuts. It was actually fun to see their fans who were counting off the goals as they kept picking away at them. They scored the next one and they say 7 more goals, and then they scored the next one, 6 more goals, and then 5 more goals. And I'm saying to myself, all right, this got to stop. We didn't want to get away from the running clock, and we were getting right there. And then we scored another one. But I give them credit in a really tough night that they didn't stop playing. They were physical throughout the game. They tried to challenge us in other ways. Good for them. I'm sure they'll learn a lot from that and do better as a result of it. But I've not been a part of a game with that kind of scoring. Just kind of wild to see in an SHL game.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
clearly.
just real quick, Luke. Before, I just wanted to, not sure if you knew these numbers, Adam, but 8 of your players had multiple points and 14 had at least a point in general. That just goes to show you, I mean, up and down the lineup contributions in this one.
Well, Dylan, we're not a team that ever runs it up. We have way too much respect for our opposition. It never our intent. I'm not a guy that looks at it and says, "Hey, this is a game. Let's go get points." Certainly not against a GBN or anybody for that matter. But I did see the stats, and guys, we're getting excited, and I want them to always perform and be concerned with that as a sidebar. Teams first, winnings there. We're not worried about personal stats, but yeah, you saw some of the guys lighten up when they were seeing how many points they had in that game. Yeah, just the way it goes with something like that.
Would you say 7-1 after the first period is good enough of a quick start for your liking?
Yeah, that definitely met our goal. I mean, it was a forever long first period. I mean, it was like a 50-minute first period, just with penalties and goals and the ref stoppage play a couple times. So it was a long, long night, and I think that also kind of weighed in on everybody on both teams that were just like, get this thing over with already. But yeah, that's exactly what I had hoped for, Luke, was to see that kind of come out, turn the Jets on, and just end the game right away. I don't like when teams hang around us. It's too competitive a league that if somebody's in the game and it's 0-0, 1 goal game late in the game, anything can happen. For us, it's you try and take them out quick and hope they go to sleep. And like I said, GBN didn't ever go to sleep in that game. They kept playing. So again, kudos to them.
One. Well, Coach Cheris, we lost you for a moment. Able to bring you back real quick. I wanted to ask one more question about your captaincy. You guys chose five captains this year. If I am so corrected, three C's. Just tell me how it's all spread out and what really sticks out about every single one of those captains.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we were able to reconnect. I appreciate it. It was an interesting year. We had five returners this year and guys that, like we talked about earlier, were, you know, 17 graduates, a lot of new faces, and these five guys have been doing a great job. And I kind of felt going into it like all of them were going to wear a letter, and it was just how it was going to play out. And it turned out that, we vote as a team, and, all five of these guys got all the votes except for a few guys got a couple of votes here and there. But we were going to go two captains and three assistants, and it ended up being a tie for a couple of the guys. And we decided, what, they all earned it, they all deserve it, and we're not going to take it away from one of them. We got five great leaders, like you said, three captains and Jack Hurstrit, Nolan Naggets, and Chase Marino, and two assistants and Kyo Yang and Keegan Roween. And yeah, they've been doing just a phenomenal job of leading through the summer and into tryouts and so far in the season. So really proud of that group. Great group.
Yeah, and real quickly before we leave here, I was just curious when it comes to the vocalizing in the locker room, is it all five of them or is there anybody in specific who really takes that role into their hands?
Yeah, they're all different. I mean, that's the unique thing about it. They all bring different elements to the team of like, role models on the ice with their play, how they act off the ice, what they do in the locker room, how they're doing their training, their off ice training. So they each kind of have a role that they all live up to. But, I've heard each of them, use their voice in a good way. There's a couple of guys that are a little more vocal. A couple of guys are, lead by example type of guys that are going to put in the work. So it's a nice blend between all of it. And, we also tell the other guys, we have a lot of seniors on the team this year as well. And we've had some of our best leaders not wear letters over the years. And, we asked these guys to step up as well. We got some good personalities that'll be the glue. And there's, another three or four guys that I think are going to really chip in here and be voices in the locker room and on the bench and helping lead the way for us.
Well, Coach, we thank you for your time today. Appreciate you as always joining us every year and good luck this season with the Trevians.
Yeah.
Guys,
Thanks,
thanks so
Coach.
much. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you soon. All right, guys,
Yep.
have a good
See you
one.
soon. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, bye-bye.
So that brings us to our question of the week and trivia question, starting with the question of the week. And it's kind of a tough one with the small sample of hockey we've seen in the SHL, but which defense has looked the best so far in the early goings? And of course, you cannot say Glenbrook South because they have not played yet.
Hasn't allowed a goal so far this season, right? But
That's true. That's true.
Luke, I mean, based on the game the other day, I'm going to say Loyola. I mean, they begin the season off with only 17 shots allowed, shutout from Charlie Trapp. I think part of having a good defense is having a good goaltender, and they sure do. Charlie Trapp is now a junior for Loyola Academy, and well, 9-0 speaks for itself. I mean, yes, we're focusing on the defense, but just the fact that they were able to dominate offensively while still keeping their defense in check, not allowing a lot of shots, and the ones that do get through are stopped. For that reason, I'm going to say Loyola as my answer.
Now, I would most likely go with Loyola as well, but just to switch it up, to be completely honest with you, I've also been very impressed with St. Ignatius so far this season. They had to move on from Brody Netsky last year. They have Nick Nocero, who was a backup last year. He's played all three games so far. He's only allowed 7 goals total. That's a goals allowed average of 2.33. He's made 62 saves, and that just goes to show you, yes, his save percentage isn't stout. It isn't incredible, but then again, it's not bad at all. And that just really means your defense is doing what they need. And you look at the split between those two numbers, that's not even 70 shots over 3 games. That's not bad at all. You'll take that any 3 game span of the season if you're a goalie. That means the guys on the blue line are doing the job for him, and that's why I would lean with the Wolfpack as well as the Ramblers, of course. They have Charlie Trapp. They've got defenders from last year. They've got plenty from last year. It's they're going to be trouble as well. So Over to our trivia question now. And Dylan, if you'd like to relay us in on what last week's trivia question was, and we had an answer and even a reply.
Yes, yes. And first of all, we'll give a quick shout out to the guy who answered. But the question was, who scored the first goal in the Scholastic Hockey League this season at any level, varsity, AHL, or JV? The correct answer was Mark Jacot. Jacot scored for the Glenbrook North Spartans gold with 144 to go in the first period against St. Ignatius Maroon. And none other than Dana Loken coming in here with the correct answer. Dana Loken, if any of you are watchers from last season, you know he is the GOAT at answering our trivia questions. Dana, not gonna lie, not sure you went in the last few months there at the end of the season last year. We just kind of missed you, but hopefully we'll get a full 51 minutes from you this year. And then Mark Jacot himself replied, "For real." So he
FR.
scored the first FR. The first
FR.
goal of the Scholastic Hockey League season came in the AHL by GBN Gold and Mark Jacot, assisted by Jaden DeLeon for good measure.
Well, that brings us to this week's trivia question. Is an interesting one. So we saw a 10-goal game this week, if you were listening. Now, there have been two teams in the last 4 years to score 10 or more goals in an SHL game. Who are they? So once again, there have been two teams to score 10 goals or more in an SHL game over the last 4 years. Name those two teams, Dylan.
And Luke, I just want to add, that does not count Nutria's performance against GBN. Nutria could be somewhere sprinkled in as the answer, but before last week, right, there were
Yes.
two teams that have scored 10 goals in a single SHL game regular season.
So that will do it here on episode number 3. We thank you guys so much for being here. As always, hope you can get a little bit more interactive in the comments so we can read you guys and make you guys feel acknowledged, and hopefully make you feel smart if you do get the trivia question right. But if you get it wrong, we won't call you out. So want to thank you. As always, Dylan Ward is beside me. My name is Luke Jordan. We will see you next week for episode number 4.